Hello everyone. This video is on loving people no matter what they can do for you. And sometimes as we move around, we can get so caught up in what we want to achieve and who's going to help us achieve it and who's not. And we can just start splitting people into groups, those that are helpful and those that are not helpful, those that are relevant and those that are irrelevant. And it can be taken to another level, those that deserve attention, those that don't deserve attention. It can be taken to another level, those that deserve to live, those that deserve to die. And the mind can make that jump. These people have a right to be on the planet and these people don't, and it doesn't matter what happens to them because they're not producing, they're irrelevant, they're not helping, they're draining on society. All of this kind of stuff can happen in a mental space. And that kind of thinking process occurs out of a level of ignorance. It's a non-unified way of understanding the world. And when we start to awaken, we realize that everything that we are is also in other people, and that every emotion that we feel is felt by other people, and that everything we do to others, we do to ourselves. So if we are splitting people up into groups that deserve to be here and groups that don't, groups that are helpful, groups that are not, we create internal splitting and repression of parts of ourselves that we don't want to see. And so maybe we're wandering around and we see the mind looks at somebody and says, they're not doing a service. They should really get their life together. They're broke, they're homeless, they're a drain on society. It doesn't matter if they live or die. It's their own fault. That kind of thinking, which some people do have. They may not always voice it, but they have that sometimes. What does that mean and what does that reflect about the internal environment of the person that's judging? That means that there is some fear and anxiety around their worth. There is a connection to productivity and worth. And if they don't succeed, they're not good enough. If they're not making money, they're not good enough. If they haven't got their life together, they're not good enough. If they make mistakes, it's their own fault. This kind of thinking, this points to the inner wounding of the judging individual. And so whenever you're looking at a group or a person and you see them as less than, that points to your inner wounding. Where did you pick up that? When did you start pushing? When did you stop allowing yourself to be a human being rather than a human doer? What messages did your society, did your parents, did your culture plant in your little child brain? Because children, they allow everything to be as it is without judging it. They are curious. They play in the dirt. They'll run up to a homeless person. They don't judge. They value everything. This is a learned, ignorant behavior that comes from misunderstanding and has to be dropped for our heart space to open and for us to rise into who we truly are. Because whenever we are objectifying other people, we objectify ourselves. Whenever we are judging other people, we are judging ourselves. Whenever we are hard on other people, we are hard on ourselves. It all is self. Everything reflects your inner world. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just feel connected to everyone that we meet in a deep level and not feel so lonely and have that dialogue just subside? Or maybe it's still there, but there's a distance between who we are and those negative thoughts. There's spaciousness. And we understand when those judgy thoughts come up, oh, there's stress. I have had a life where I've picked up stress, and now it's exiting in the form of these negative thoughts about these other people. Oh, compassion. Compassion for yourself leads to compassion for others. Anything that you give yourself, you give to other people. It just works that way. If you practice self-love, forgiveness, compassion, then it's easier for you to give that gift to everybody else. And this is the world that is waiting for you to live in. This compassionate, non-judgmental world, the celestial world, is available to you while you're in a body. It's there right this minute. You just have to step into it. And there's low loneliness and disconnection in that place. It may boost the ego to think that you're better than somebody else, but the loss of life force, the loss of compassion is never worth the boost in an ego. It's not even comparable. You have no idea what you're losing by boosting your ego. It's incomparable. The lack of awareness itself is never worth it. So if you notice the ego is doing this, wants to put itself above somebody else, notice it. That's dangerous. That is never worth it. It's never worth it to have that inequality in your system, because you will lose the possibility to live heaven on earth while you're in the body. So even though the ego might try and trick you, oh, that feels so good to feel better than other people. I get a little bit of a dopamine hit. I walk around with a little sass in my step. Look at them and oh, look at me. There can be the illusion that this feels good, but you have no idea how good you'd feel if you dropped it and you felt connected to everyone. If you dropped it and you felt less lonely, if you dropped it and you felt your heart space open, it's not comparable. And sometimes there can be certain things that are sold to us that want to create this. Maybe there's certain drugs that you take that create this. Maybe there's certain people that sell this. And this can get addictive. It's an addiction to put yourself above and put somebody below you is an addiction. It's an addiction that isn't really talked about. It's an addiction that creates horror in the world when it gets extreme. It can create wars, it can create all sorts of horrific things when it gets extreme. We need to nip it in the bud. Also, if we notice it in other people, have compassion for them, because to live a life where you think you're better than anyone else is a very lonely life. It's a very disconnected life. The heart space is closed. There's not the emotional complexity. There can be disassociation. It can be due to childhood trauma. It needs to be healed. And any impediment will be dissolved in order for us to raise our level of awareness to a point where we can reconnect with all beings and know them to be part of ourselves. And it's important not to just commodify people, especially when we're on dating apps and we're in a digital age. We can get kind of brainwashed into thinking people are like disposable and they're consumable goods, and there's not a human being behind the photo. Everybody's sensitive. Everybody deserves respect. Nobody deserves to be consumed, to be stripped of their humanity and reduced to a purpose for somebody else, something to be used. There's a cruelty in that is felt throughout humanity and leads to huge amounts of stress in the collective. And so there's going to be ways to slow down and to realize, I make fun of this person on the app. Oh, look, this is a terrible photo. Oh, look, swipe next, 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 next. Just like products on Amazon. These are human beings that are complex, that can teach you lessons, that mirror your inner world to you, that are parts of your very being, that are divine. And we just swipe, swipe, swipe as if they're just products. And then the mind judges them and just throws them away. Useful, good looking, not good looking, hot, successful, not successful, too old, too young, stupid, clever, pathetic, waste of space. Just all of this chopping up, chop, 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 chops up yourself. What you're doing is you're slicing up your soul, and then you feel icky after looking. You're like, I don't feel good when I'm swiping on the apps. No, it's because you're self-harming. Judging others is self-harm. Commodifying other people is self-harm. It's good to notice that, because sometimes it can be subtle. You just don't really feel good after being on the app, so you don't really feel good after being on that date and being lost in your head because you're thinking about the boxes that that person's ticking and what they're not ticking, and maybe they could introduce you to that person. And so you're not present fully, you're not connecting on a soul level. You give all the power to your mind, and your mind doesn't really know what's good for you most of the time. Obviously be practical to a certain extent, but don't take it too far. And anybody who's really met somebody and loved that person and spent a lot of time and maybe got married or found a soulmate, they probably couldn't predict it or commodify it or planet. And so that's interesting to note. And so I want to pray for us to stop objectifying one another and for us to connect with each other on a deeper level, on an equal level, so that we can live a more beautiful life together